Good morning, Virgo. You need to stop what you're doing. Right now, whatever you were in the middle of, whatever thought you were carrying into this moment, put it down because something is happening. And it's the kind of thing that when you look back on this period of your life from somewhere quieter, somewhere further along, you will mark this as the moment things stop being what they were. Not with a bang, not with an announcement, but with that particular silence that falls right before everything rearranges itself, the silence before the shift. You felt it before, that held breath feeling, that sense that the ground beneath you is still too still, in the way that only happens right before it moves. Lock the door. Sit down. We need to talk about what's really happening. There are moments in a life, not many, but a few, where the story you've been telling yourself simply cannot hold anymore. Not because you were lying, not because you were foolish, but because stories have a structure, and structure has a limit, and there comes a point where the weight of what's actually true becomes too heavy for the architecture of what you believed, and something cracks. And in that crack, in that uncomfortable, disorienting, almost unbearable space where the old story is breaking and the new one hasn't formed yet, something gets in. Light, maybe, or just air. The kind of air that hasn't been in the room in a very long time. That is where you are right now. Whether you've named it yet or not, I want to talk about the thing you never thought would happen, not the event itself, because only you know the specific shape of your specific rupture, but the feeling that surrounds it, that particular disorientation of finding yourself in a scene you had rehearsed as hypothetical. If this ever happened, I would. And discovering that the real version of it feels nothing like the rehearsal. The hypothetical was clean, contained. You knew your lines. You knew how you'd respond. You had the exit mapped. And then it actually happened. And you didn't respond how you thought. And the exit wasn't where you put it. And the ground felt like water and the walls felt like they were breathing. And somewhere in the middle of it all, you were a stranger to yourself. That strangeness, that not recognizing yourself in the moment you'd always said would define you, that is not failure. That is what it actually feels like to be human inside something real. The locked room again, because when something happens that we never thought would happen, when the unthinkable arrives and sits down at the table without being invited, the first thing most people do is lock the room, push it behind a door, tell themselves they'll deal with it later, after they've stabilized, after the shock has worn off, after they've figured out how to hold it without it changing too many things at once. But the room doesn't stay locked. It never does. What's behind it seeps through the cracks, shows up in the body as tension, shows up in the night as images that arrive without permission, shows up in ordinary moments, a song, a smell, a specific quality of afternoon light as a sudden, inexplicable undoing. The locked room always finds a way to be heard. Hold on. I want to say something about shock before we go further. Because shock is misunderstood. People treat it like a temporary malfunction, something that passes and then you're back to normal, back to processing clearly, back to being the version of yourself who knows what to do. But shock is actually something much more interesting than that. Shock is the moment the nervous system decides that what is happening cannot be integrated at full speed, that the information is too large, too contradictory, too disruptive to the existing order of things. And so it slows everything down, creates distance, wraps the thing in a kind of muffled unreality so that the system can approach it gradually rather than all at once. Shock is not you being broken. Shock is you being protected by your own interior wisdom, which knows that some things need to be approached like a wound, carefully, slowly, with clean hands. Let me talk about the architecture of the unthinkable, because the things we say will never happen. The things we lock outside the realm of possibility, the scenarios we refuse to fully imagine, they are almost never random. They are almost always the things we sensed at some level were more possible than we could afford to believe. The mind doesn't waste energy fortifying against things it genuinely doesn't fear. We only say never in a million years about the things that live close enough to be threatening. The things that, if we let them fully in, would require us to change something we weren't ready to change, to know something we weren't ready to know, to become someone we hadn't yet figured out how to be. And so we said never. And we meant it. And we built the walls carefully. And we lived inside the certainty of never. Because the certainty of never is comfortable. It is a kind of order, a kind of control. And then when the unthinkable happens, when the never arrives, two things happen simultaneously in the interior. The first is devastation, or shock, or rage, or grief. Whatever form the rupture takes in your particular body, your particular history, that is real. That is valid. That doesn't need to be managed or minimized or moved through faster than it naturally moves. But the second thing, quieter, almost hidden beneath the first, is something that looks like relief. Wait, stay with me here. Not relief that it happened, but relief that it is no longer hypothetical. Relief that the thing you were bracing against, the thing you were spending enormous amounts of energy holding at bay with the word never, has arrived. And you are still here, still breathing, still standing in your own body, still, and this is the part that matters, still yourself. The thing you feared did not destroy you. It arrived, and you are still here. Let me talk about the cinder and the fire, because I think for many of you, those who are sitting with something seismic right now, something that cracked the careful order of your life open without asking permission, the instinct is to focus on what was lost, what broke, what can't be rebuilt in the same form. And that loss is real. I'm not going to minimize it by rushing past it. Some things that break don't go back together. Some certainties, once cracked, don't seal. Some versions of a relationship, a situation, a story, once disturbed at the root, cannot be replanted as they were. That is a real loss. Grieve it if it needs grieving. Don't let anyone, including the part of yourself that wants to be fine, rush you past it. But underneath the loss, underneath the rubble of the thing that could not hold, there is always something that the structure was built on top of. Something older, something that predates the story that just broke, something that belonged to you before any of this. The fire, still there, even under the ash, even in the wreckage, even in the disorientation of standing in a landscape you no longer recognize. There is a warmth at the center that none of this touched. It was there before. It is there now. I'm not sure why, but this feels important to say right now. The version of you that exists after something unthinkable. The one who had to reorganize their entire interior around a new reality. That version is not a diminished version. There is a particular kind of knowing that only comes from having been through the thing you said you'd never survive. A particular quality of clarity, a particular absence of the small fears, the ones that used to take up so much space because the large fear arrived and you were in it. And now you know something about yourself that no amount of careful living could have taught you. You know what you're made of. Not what you hoped you were made of. Not what you performed for other people. What you actually are. Underneath the preparation, underneath the persona, underneath the careful management of how you're perceived, that knowledge is not nothing. That knowledge is everything. Let me slow down for a second, because I think there are some of you sitting with something tonight that is very recent, still raw, still in the stage where the shock hasn't fully converted into understanding yet, where you're still in the unreality of it, still catching yourself thinking things are normal and then remembering in a wave that they're not. And I'm not going to tell you that it's fine, or that it happens for a reason, or that everything will make sense when enough time passes. What I will say is this: the disorientation you're in right now, that feeling of the ground being uncertain, of the map being wrong, of not quite recognizing the landscape, it is temporary. Not because the thing that happened will unhappen, but because the human interior is extraordinarily good, given enough time and enough gentleness at building new ground. Not the same ground, different, sometimes more solid, sometimes built from materials that weren't available before the old ground broke. The broken key. This image keeps returning because I think it's true in a way that matters tonight. The version of you that comes out the other side of the unthinkable, jagged, changed, carrying the precise shape of what you've been through. That version fits things the undamaged version never could have. Certain rooms only open from the inside, and only to keys that have been through something, that know the weight of a door that resists, that have the specific earned patience of something that has waited in the dark. You are becoming that key right now, in the middle of this, in the discomfort of the rearranging, in the exhaustion of processing something that arrived without warning and asked everything of you. You are being shaped, not broken, shaped. We're at the end, and I want to close where we started, with the locked room. Lock your windows, lock your doors. not to keep the world out, but to create a space just for you right now. A space that is quiet enough to hear the thing underneath the shock, underneath the noise of the unthinkable having arrived, underneath the question of what it means and what comes next and how everything reorganizes itself from here. Underneath all of that, there is a stillness, a center that the event did not touch, that no event ever touches, no matter how seismic. A place in you that was never at risk, that watched everything unfold from somewhere very deep and very still and very certain that you would remain. Find that place tonight. Rest there if you can, even briefly, even just for the length of a breath. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Your own discernment is the only compass worth trusting in this. 2 questions for the quiet or for the comments. If something cracked open in you tonight, what was the last thing you told yourself would never happen? That part of you always knew was possible. And who do you become when the story you built your certainty around no longer holds? Sit with those gently, without rushing toward an answer. I'll see you in the next one.